All right, everybody, welcome to this Comic-Con educational panel. This is a panel focused specifically on a very serious matter, as you can see how we're dressed. We are focusing on why being creative or having a creative outlet is so important to what you do professionally and also personally. I'm Francis Kong here, and I have moderated many Comic-Con panels before, and I'm really honored to have some really great guests here. I'm going to actually let them introduce themselves first before we get started. Once we have all that done, then we'll go down some of these questions about why we think creative outlets are literally so important for a person's well-being, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I'll go down, I guess, clockwise of what I see on my screen here. Let's go with you, Captain Pike. Tell us who you are in your real life and what you do.
Hi, my name is Steve. I am in costume as a Star Trek Discovery captain. And in my professional life, I am a clinical assistant professor at Stanford University's School of Medicine, teaching psychiatry and behavioral sciences. And I clinically see patients in my practice for addictions and psychiatry. In my personal life, I am a huge Star Trek nerd and a Star Wars fan, and I am so glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Chan. All right, going down on my side here. General Leia, Organa Leia, please tell us who you are in your alter ego.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Zhou. I am the Chief Science Officer at Color. We are a company that does genetics as well as now COVID-19 testing. We're located here in the Bay Area. My background, I am a cancer biologist, a clinical geneticist, and now dabbling in epidemiology. And in my free time, I am a huge Star Wars fan. So I dug into some more of the archives of Leia. This is Hoth Leia, so from Empire Strikes Back. And I'm really excited to be talking with all of you all today about this very important topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alicia. Okay, and finally, I believe this is the Dark Magician that is joining us here. Please tell us who, love the hat. Please tell us who you are in your alter ego.
Hi, I'm Liezl. I'm also known as Title's Cosplay Online. So I'm a cosplayer. I've been cosplaying for around 2013. I make a lot of my own costumes. I've taught from myself, and I make a lot of stuff in my free time. Professionally, I just recently got my master's in mechanical engineering from UC Berkeley last year, and now I'm a manufacturing engineer at a small electronics company in Milpitas. And a big part of how I became an engineer is actually inspired by my love of cosplay and all things nerdy. And so those two things are really closely intertwined, and I'm really excited to talk about that today with everyone. Thanks
Awesome.
for having me.
So we got great representation from Stanford, from Berkeley, and I believe two really good schools. Alicia, you're representing as well too?
Yes, I'm MIT and Harvard.
Oh yes, MIT and Harvard. Yeah, I've heard of those schools as well. Okay. Okay. So from the world of academia, we're gonna dive a little bit into now that we have an idea what you guys do, and we're talking a little bit about mental health in general. And you guys obviously all have, I think, pretty stressful jobs, especially in COVID-19, where you're producing a lot of these test kits. You're in the medical field, and also as a biomedical engineer. Before we talk about like creative outlets, I'm gonna throw this out there, and whoever wants to answer can answer it. But how do you guys define what mental health is in the first place? Anyway.
I mean, I feel like Steve probably knows the clinical definition of mental health better than any of the rest of us. But I mean, I think for me, mental health is really how do you approach your day? How do you have the positivity and the emotional balance and well-being, and probably aspects of your social life as well, to be able to make sure that as you are undergoing sort of all the experiences that are happening to you throughout life, that your mental state is positive, that you're able to sort of take in everything that's happening to you all day long and be able to process that and be able to sort of maintain that kind of equilibrium in your life. So personally, that's what that would mean to me.
Cool.
Yeah, I
Steve?
agree. I think with mental health, it's sort of well-being, psychologically, socially, spiritually. And when we think about mental health, there's a spectrum. There are mental disorders, disease, sort of the things that we think about when we think of, say, a psychiatric hospital. We also think of mental well-being, the more positive things where you want to achieve a certain quality of life, or you want to do the things that you want to do in life. So I view mental health as a spectrum, and certainly anyone can land anywhere on the spectrum. And our goal, at least in what I practice in psychiatry, is to help people move towards the end that they want. Most folks want to improve their quality of life. So when I think of mental health, I think of well-being.
Okay, very good. Liezl, what do you think mental health actually means?
Yeah, I think I can't put it a whole lot better than Alicia and Stephen, especially. I am by no means a medical professional, but I can only talk about my own experiences. As Stephen said, it is a lot about, your own well-being, and as Alicia said as well, kind of being able to process how you deal with things in life, like, struggles or even good or bad things, how you can kind of take those in and, you know, make yourself kind of see, like, if bad things happen, you can kind of process it and be like, okay, why is this happening, or why do I feel the way I feel, and hopefully kind of get more of a positive reaction out of it. And that can definitely help you kind of how to react to those situations as well going forward.
Okay, good, thank you. So if we're all agreeing that that's the definition of mental health is basically someone's overall well-being and able to focus and function properly, if that, it sounds like it's pretty important to me. And if that's the case, why is it pretty obvious to me and to the, I think, community, why is mental health largely ignored a lot of times? Anyone can take that?
Well,
I think sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Liezl. I will go for it.
Yeah, I think there's just still kind of a stigma around it, especially growing up in an Asian family. My parents, it was very hard for them to admit that mental health is an actual thing. When I went to college, I had a lot of social anxiety and depression, and for a long time, I didn't even realize I had that. My parents were always just like, oh, you're just sad, get over it. Like, it's not an actual illness. So for a long time, I was like, oh, I'm feeling this way because it's like, it's not something in my brain. I should just get over it. So I think a lot of it, people are, I guess, scared that they want to admit that it's an actual illness. They don't want to admit that. They just want to kind of say like, oh, you're just kind of sad. Like, this isn't something that you can just, like, you can actually medically fix. So I think a lot of people still don't understand that it's a thing that people actually struggle with, and it can be even like a chemical imbalance in the brain that could be fixed medically. So I think there's still a lot of maybe ignorance in the community, I guess, that could definitely be helped with more education and awareness.
Yeah, I think the other piece is, I'm a parent, and I have a 5.5-year-old. You might hear him in the background at some point during this panel. But one of the things when I watch him sort of learning how to deal with his emotions, he definitely sort of goes between very extreme emotions very quickly. He'll be very, very happy and then very, very sad very quickly. And I think when we see that kind of behavior as adults, we kind of assume that it means that you lack maturity or that somehow you haven't grown up yet. And so when you see an adult behaving that way, you don't think that this person maybe is struggling with mental health, and instead you say, oh, grow up, or like, oh, you be more mature about it. And it's because we're seeing this behavior that we kind of equate to the way children act, and we think that must mean that you can grow out of it. And that often makes it so that people feel very sort of embarrassed then to admit that they have struggles with mental health, because it's almost as if they're admitting that they aren't mature enough or that they haven't grown up. And I think that's one of the major issues why people won't recognize if they have that.
Wow, interesting. Stephen, what about you?
Yeah, I when I think about and reflect about what Liezl had shared about how people feel like it's something that you can just get over, or that it's something that's pretty stigmatized. I think that mental health really is the last frontier of medicine and healthcare. When we think about all the medical discoveries that we've learned how the heart pumps blood. We've seen how lungs can, pump in air and pump out air, and so we can see a lot of these physical changes in the anatomy of a human body, but the brain is super complex. You can measure things through imaging, through electric signals, and you can also measure someone's mind state or mental state by speaking to them or looking at their facial expressions or hearing the way they talk. When it comes to the brain, it's such a complex organ. It's taken years to develop, and everything from childhood, everything from education, how a family is formed, to the present state can all really change the way we behave and feel. And so with mental health, it's so complex. And Liezl touched upon, could it be neurotransmitters, or could it be a chemical imbalance, or could it be part of someone's upbringing or environment? And so it's such a complex issue, which is why I really like the subject. At the same time, there's a lot of misunderstanding about mental health. It's hard to connect the dots when a lot of the concepts are super abstract to people, especially in our schooling and our education, where mental health and emotional intelligence isn't something that's part of the curriculum and isn't necessarily something that you can test on a multiple guess standardized exam. So that's why I think mental health it's truly is a new frontier, or the last frontier of medicine.
How appropriate, Captain Pike. All right, so what I'm getting here is, and it makes total sense to me.
Francis back?
Oh, I'm here. Okay. I guess I forgot if Rose here. Are you guys back? Okay. All right, we're back. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, from a cultural point, I'm hearing like, yeah, so there could be like there could be a cultural, I would say indifference to it, or not admitting that it actually is an issue. There's also a social component where you associate maturity with a state of mental stability, so to speak. And then there's also our medical reasons of why we're just not at that level of technology yet to really measure. And if you can't measure something, then you can't really gauge where it is on the spectrum. I assume that's what you're saying, right, Stephen? All right. So, okay, if that's the case, then we're fighting a lot of battles here for the state of mental health and well-being. So then, if that's the case, largely this seems like it comes down to the individual to be able to have to do a lot of self-healing, self-reflection, self-recognition, self-insight, because there's almost zero support out there, and sometimes even negative support out there. So if that's the case, why do you think creative outlets actually act in a therapeutic way at all to the well-being of one's mental health in the first place? Anyone?
I mean, this is something that I feel like just anecdotally, when I think across the scientific field, and when you think of people who have very, very good analytical, mathematical science minds, every one of those people I know also happens to have a creative outlet. They like photography, they like music, they like art. And I personally as well, I find that being able to use art as an outlet is really important because of how free form it is. Unlike in engineering and science and math, where there's always a right answer and a wrong answer, with art, it really is just a spectrum. There is no right answer, there is no wrong answer. You can find what gives you joy And no one can disagree with whether that gives you joy or not. No one can judge the sort of quality of that joy as long as you derive that joy. I mean, I think that means that there's a much sort of broader spectrum in which you can really display and sort of emote your emotions, because there is no sort of black and white. It really is, you can be a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And there are so many different types of outlets that I feel like it can really give you that kind of balance. Certainly for me, where my job is very analytical during the day, being able to do something creative outside of that is a complete sort of 180 from what I do during the day. And it really helps me to actually focus on my job, because it rests that kind of analytical part of my brain to be able to go and think about more creative things. So to me, I think being creative is a natural counterpart actually to being analytical.
Okay, very good. Stephen or Liezl?
Yeah, I completely agree with Alicia. It's very, I believe creativity is really important. It kind of, you know, like she said, there's no boundaries on creativity. You can really do whatever you want, and you can't say, you know, there's no right or wrong answer to creativity. So for me with cosplay, it really helped me kind of be more outgoing, I guess. I was always known as the quiet, shy kid in class. You know, I was always in the background, like people didn't really take notice of me. And it was hard for me to make friends. But then when I started getting into cosplay, you know, it helped me bloom a lot. It brought me to this community of people who were very similar to me, and it helped me more confident when I'm wearing cosplays and I'm meeting people. And it's definitely just a venue of passion, and creativity is all about, you know, bringing something to life or bringing some kind of vision to life, and it's very freeing in that way. And to me, it's very important to have that. And so it's definitely really helpful, again, for me personally, for my social anxiety. It was really helpful to have that venue to kind of show people like, oh, I'm not just the kid who just sits quietly in class and like does whatever she's told or whatever. I have this other side that can help me self and like show people that I have this other side.
Awesome, very good, thank you. Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, creativity, I gotta say, creativity, mental health go hand in hand. And we just heard an example from Liezl about how really the creativity really has helped her come out of her shell, and also help with, you know, keep things calm. And I think that when we see mental health treatments, for instance, it's not just medicine, it's not just talk therapy. There can also be healthy recreational exercises, healthy creative exercises. Where I work, for instance, folks can go out on trips, outings, even healthy activities like cooking too. Cooking is so creative and so delicious too. So, and it brings so much joy to people. So when I think of creativity, I think that creativity is very helpful for mental health. But at the same time, for those who need help with some of their mental health, sometimes it's hard to be creative if you are, say, very anxious, or are in sort of a caught in a loop where you're sort of thinking about bad memories over and over and over again. And so I got to disagree with one thing you mentioned, Francis, about how there's no support. There is support, I feel like. I've heard of how some in video game conferences, for instance, video game conferences have more mental health activities and more greater mental health awareness. You've heard of it? Have you heard of this?
I have heard there are subsets in a lot of these video game conferences that do offer this.
Yes, and I believe there's actually a Harvard-trained psychologist or a psychiatrist, I forget which, but someone on the East Coast who actually goes and streams on Twitch and also talks about mental health while they're playing video games. Wow. Yeah, and also there's a lot more like social media. I know social media has been painted in a negative light for a lot of the issues with mental health. but some of the companies have been working with mental health groups. Like one of my friends runs Stanford Brainstorm, and they've worked with Pinterest, for instance. And there are some healthy ways to use these platforms to get mental health support. If you follow healthy accounts like Mental Health America or NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, they have a lot of uplift. It's great to use to get some positive support in your life too. So there is some good out there too when it comes to mental health support.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing, Stephen, sort of going off what you said about sort of Twitch being a platform where mental health is actually something to be talked about. There is something about the creativity that also is a form of escapism, which I think is very healthy, to be able to sort of unplug from the current reality of the world and whatever stresses or problems you may have in your life, and be able to somewhat move into a different space and kind of escape from that. Over the course of 2020, which has been a very stressful year for all of us, I discovered adult coloring books, right? These are coloring books for adults. They're a lot more complicated than children's coloring books, but it's the exact same concept, right? It's an image that's already been printed on the paper. I've got some really nice colored pencils. It's very sort of calming and therapeutic to sit there and just color away at, you know, my picture of nature, and there is a form of sort of escapism that comes with that, and really when I think of sort of why I love Star Wars, for example, is it's really great to be able to for however long sort of take off the mantle of all of my problems and all of these things that happen to me today, put that away and really dive into a different universe or a different world where things are a little different and the problems are very different, and I don't have to think about my current sort of world during that time. And I actually think then it's really helpful to unplug. And at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, for example, where I certainly felt a lot of sort of uncertainty about the world, I was very worried about what was going to happen every single day. And my job was very stressful because we were building this COVID testing lab. I really found that was the moment when I really needed the creativity and the outlet more than any time before, because I couldn't have my brain 24/7 be focused on the real world and the real world problems. I needed to have that break.
Yeah. So what I'm getting here is that a lot of mental health can be have some sort of correlation with very restrictive, very demanding environments or schedules or expectations on a constant basis. And the reason why having a creative outlet is a great therapeutic is because that kind of, by definition, removes all of those restrictions. And you make your own rules, you make your own timelines, you make your own goals, you make your own achievements. There is nothing that you need to do for approval from an external source. That's what I'm getting here. All right, I love that. That makes so much sense. That makes a perfect correlation of why. So if that's the case, then a little bit more about you guys now. Anyone who wants to speak up first, what do you guys do personally as a creative outlet that you see as a very therapeutic way for you to recharge, relax, and take on the new day again? Any one of you guys? Oh, and why? Not just why, but how did you discover it? That's an important thing. Like, some people may want to know how to discover their recharge. So how did you guys discover it? What do you guys do? And how did you guys discover that? Anyone? Just go. How about let's go with you, Liezl, because I think it's pretty obvious what you do, but I would love to know how you discovered it too. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. I must have. I think I blanked out. Did you? Are you back? Okay, we're back. So Liezl, I was going to ask you. So I'm going to start with you. What exactly do you do, and how did you discover it in terms of your therapeutic outlet?
Yeah, sure. So I do cosplay. So yeah, like I said, I have been cosplaying for several years now, and I make my own stuff. So ever since I was a kid, I always loved like nerdy, geeky stuff. I played Pokemon as a kid. You know, I watched Sailor Moon and all the anime. And growing up, I played a lot of video games and so on. And I always loved that side of like, you know, what I did in my free time. But at the same time, I felt sort of ashamed of it. You know, all my friends at school, they were all just bookworms and like they weren't really into video games. So I was scared of telling anyone I was into Pokemon because I didn't want to be made fun of. And so, you know, this kind of mentality just kind of grew in me for a long time until around, I think it was almost the end of high school, where I found this cosplayer online, and she's very famous. I've probably heard of her, it's Yaya Han. She's a very famous professional cosplayer, and she makes all of her stuff, and it's all amazing. And I saw that, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like she's, you know, a grown adult who makes these costumes and becomes these characters and brings them to life just for fun. And I immediately wanted to do that. And so for my high school graduation, I asked for a sewing machine, and I taught myself how to sew, like, you know, pajama bottoms. And then I grew from there. And it was just a really cool outlet for me to finally show that, like, yeah, I'm a nerd, and I dress up like Rukia from Bleach, and all this kind of stuff. And it was really fun going to conventions and meeting people, again, you know, who were like me, who also maybe thought that it was not the cool thing to do, but because there were so many other people like us, now we could finally share in our, like, you know, fandoms and all of that. And yeah, it's always just been kind of, for me, if you know me, it's like 90% of what I do in my free time. Like if I have free time, that's what I'm thinking about, like, oh, what's my next cosplay going to be? Or like looking at Etsy or fabric shop, like, oh, look at these nice fabrics, I can use this in my next costume. And it's definitely, it could be stressful at times to get cosplays done like the night before for an event, but at the same time, it's still definitely therapeutic to, you know, just sit in my room and be able to sew things and kind of get out of my, like, you know, like Alicia said, my work zone of just thinking, oh, I have to do this tomorrow. I have like these works, I have bills to do or whatever, but I could just be like, I'm going to dress up like Dark Magician Girl today. I get to do this. Like, it's really fun to just be able to step out of that and become someone else for a day, I guess. And that definitely led me into love of designing and making things for a long time. In college, I was actually on track to becoming a doctor because that was my parents' dream for me. And so I was, you know, taking chemistry classes and doing all of that at the same time, like just starting cosplay and getting used to that as well. But then I realized I really did not have any interest in becoming a doctor. I don't like biology, and it's just not like, I have so much respect for people who go to med school, but I don't think I would survive that. And so while I was kind of lost in my professional career, I still had cosplay going on, and I was always loving like taking apart costumes and trying to see like, okay, how am I going to make this? How am I going to put these things together and design it? And then I kind of realized like, that's sort of like engineering, like, you know, taking things apart, designing it, figuring out how to put a design from on paper and bringing it to real life. And that's kind of how I started exploring becoming an engineer. And then here I am with a mechanical engineering degree and finally being an engineer and actually putting a lot of the skills that I got from cosplay into an actual professional career. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that changed my life. And it stemmed just from me being a nerd and playing games in my room when I was a kid. So it definitely was very helpful for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liezl. What about you, Alicia? What do you do as your creative outlet, and how did you discover it?
Yeah, so actually for me, it was is martial arts. And so for me, actually, when I was young, I grew up really wanting to be a Power Ranger. Like I really wanted to.
Awesome.
I wanted to be Trini, the Yellow Ranger, the original Yellow Ranger. I was like all about her. and I really wanted to be a martial artist when I was a kid. I was like, oh, I want to go take karate. And I went to my parents and said, hey, I really want to enroll in martial arts class. And they're like, great. And then the next weekend they signed me up for Chinese dance class. So I did Chinese dance for 2 years, like the fan dance and the ribbon dance and all that. And I think they never really quite understood. And they thought what I meant was that I wanted to do something physical, I guess. But I really wanted to be a Power Ranger. And I was like, this is not going to get me there. And so I really went most of my childhood really never ever doing anything really sports related or physical. I was very much a mathlete, not an athlete. And when I went to MIT, actually, that was when I got the opportunity to actually join a martial arts club. And so I chose the MIT Sport Taekwondo Club, and I started Taekwondo, which is this Korean martial art. And I started out as a complete beginner. I luckily was coordinated because my Chinese dance classes. And so I was able to sort of keep up with the intro classes. And I had no intention at that time to go very far. I just wanted to give it a shot. And then I really enjoyed it. There was this sort of intramural league that MIT participated in, where we actually went to tournaments, and we actually, slowly over time, I got different belt ranks, and eventually at the end of my senior year of college, I got my black belt. Which was not something I had been aiming for. In fact, I was explicitly sure I was never going to get a black belt after I saw my first black belt exam. I was like, that is super scary. I never want to do that. Like, that looks super hard. And so I got my black belt my senior year. And then afterwards, after I graduated at MIT, I actually became an instructor for the club. I stayed in Cambridge to do my PhD just down the road at Harvard. And so I was still an instructor at the MIT club. I would actually still go and teach classes there. And my coach, who was very dedicated to all of the students who were in his Taekwondo club, he was an engineer by day at Lincoln Laboratories, a computer science engineer. And then at night, he was doing all of the Taekwondo. He opened his own Taekwondo school. He was teaching the club at MIT, and he took a bunch of us and said, I think you guys can go pretty far in this sport. And I was one of those people. And so I ended up doing a lot of extra training with him. I was teaching at the MIT club. I was doing extra trainings with him at his Taekwondo school. And I actually ended up making the collegiate national team in 2009 and 2010. Wow. And I had the insane opportunity actually to travel in both years as part of the national team and compete with USA on my uniform and represent the United States at these tournaments. And one of the things that was, people always ask me, how are you getting your PhD while also competing in sort of at the international level in Taekwondo? And I don't think of them as mutually exclusive at all. I actually think it was because of the dedication I had to Taekwondo that really propelled me in my work and in my PhD, because I had no choice but to be focused at work, because I knew I was going to go and train in the evening. And so there was no opportunity to procrastinate. There was no chance to say, oh, I'm going to just take a longer coffee break, or I'm going to just watch another YouTube video, because I needed to have the discipline to say, no, tonight I'm going to go to practice, I have to teach class, or I'm going to work with my coach, whatever. But it meant that I needed to fit my PhD into those hours during the day. And any PhD student will tell you most PhDs are a 24/7 kind of thing, where you like go into lab at 2 in the morning, or like, you basically are sleeping next to lab. I couldn't do that because I had this kind of other career, other life. And I actually think it was the best thing, because I had so much balance. I was spending almost equal hours doing my PhD as I was doing Taekwondo, and I was excelling at both because I had that balance. I wasn't getting burnt out by one or the other. They were really actually helping balance each other. And so for me, that was how I discovered Taekwondo. And even now today, so I'm a 4th degree black belt now. And I actually, a couple years back, opened with some of my friends, opened a studio here in the Bay Area to teach Taekwondo. And for me, being physical fitness is always my outlet for me, sort of getting that workout every day, breaking that sweat, taking that time off for my brain to use my body is something that I feel like very much is important for me to bring balance.
Wow, gives a whole new meaning to using the force there, Alicia. Wow, a 4th degree black belt international Taekwondo competitor. Did you win or place?
I did, and I have a bronze medal from the World University Taekwondo Championships.
So we have a bronze, we have a third best Taekwondo martial artist here in our presence in
like 2010. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you haven't forgotten any of that. Okay, so very impressive. So Stephen, to you, what do you do for your creative outlets that makes you happy and brings you joy and relaxes you? And how did you discover that?
I gotta say, I'm laughing because it's hard to follow Liezl, Alicia, and Liezl's cosplay and costuming skills and the creativity behind it. Alicia's martial arts skills. I can't top that. I gotta say, I've been such growing up. I was such an introvert, and I actually did a lot of my creativity through computer arts. I remember going to Barnes & Noble booksellers, one of the bookstores, major booksellers, collecting all of the computer arts magazines, computer arts design magazines, staying after school and high school to learn Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator and InDesign in order to get a newspaper going, a monthly newspaper going. And even through college, I would do things like teach rabbit pre-meds, hundreds of rabbit pre-meds, but put together biochemical illustrations and organic chemistry illustrations in Adobe Illustrator for the worksheets. And I would take a 3D animation class. We learned Maya. I almost got a Pixar internship. I think I almost got it because I went to the second round of interviews, and they found on my resume, oh, it said honor pre-med society, and poof, it went it went out the door. So they caught me. They were on to me, and I did, admittedly, I did go through the pre-med route, the medical school route. It was just like a train track. You just go down, and it's very constrained. There's really not too much wiggle room. There's not a whole lot of room to fail. So in order to really decompress, I would do things like create art, create computer arts, create designs. I would always have a Wacom tablet. I would do Photoshop coloring of scanned art and create cartoons or comics. And then when I went to medical school, I noticed, well, this was actually, I'm dating myself. This was before Facebook really took off beyond colleges. We had a really terrible way to share files and share knowledge. So I ended up putting a lot of the creative work in creating web designs for essentially a student intranet portal that was running on an open source system. So I used some computer science skills, and I did a lot of sort of like usability testing, etc. And it was just more of a pet project, a project of love. So what I'm doing nowadays for my creative outlet is to write about my journey and to talk about how I have been, overcome things like depression and anxiety, social anxiety, and write about it in a very creative way. But that also teaches people about how to at least try to overcome a lot of those hardships that I've faced. And I'm hopeful that message can come out. So that's what I've been working on at the moment.
Well, okay. Really, all very, very powerful stories and journeys and how you guys got to where you are, and in a very early stage, you guys discovered your own personal outlet and really helped achieve that balance that I think a lot of people lack in the ones who don't get the insight yet. So we only have a few more minutes, believe it or not. It was a very fast panel. We have a few more minutes left. I'm gonna ask one last question for you guys to ask. Spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes if you can. But I'll just go down the line here. Let's go with you, Alicia, and then we'll just go down the line. What is one last bit of wisdom or departing words or resources you want to share with anyone watching this on how they can start creating that own personal second part of their life that gives that balance and gives that framework and and helps them discipline and achieve that the overall yin and yang presence in their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the thing I would say is that sort of creativity and art come in many, many different forms. And so I think a lot of people feel like they need to pick a sort of conventional form of art, but there's actually so many different ways you can think about that. It could be visual, it could be written, it could be musical, it could be physical. And I think, you know, everyone probably has something that they really enjoy. And it's just about sort of following that intuition. And especially when it comes to being creative, because there is no right or wrong, it really is about sort of figuring out what it is that you're really excited to do. And the way you know you're excited is when you want to do more, right? When you want to learn more, or you want to find somebody else who likes the same thing. That's how you know you've found something that you really enjoy. And just be unafraid to pursue that. And I think we've all sort of said here, being creative is a key part of being successful in other parts of your life. So instead of saying, oh, I don't have time for this because I have to make time for my career or my job or my family or my whatever, and it's often the first thing you cut off your list. Instead of doing that, make it the last thing you cut off your list. Make it the to you have to do, because it's the thing that's going to keep you and give you that balance. So don't let it be the thing cross off.
I love that. Thank you so much. Liezl, what is the parting words of wisdom for people who are looking to achieve balance and a creative outlet for their life?
Yeah, I think Alicia said it really well. You know, just having it as a priority is something that a lot of people overlook, I think. Like I have a lot of friends who don't really look into the creative side. Like if they have free time, they're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I'm just going to sit around and watch TV. And for me, I'm like, oh, I have to be doing cosplay. Like if I'm not working on cosplay, it feels so weird to me. Like I don't feel productive because it's just so part of like who I am, like having something to do that's not work, that's enjoyable. And you know, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to just stick with one thing and like that's the thing that defines you. Like there's plenty of things you could like Alicia said, like, you know, try coloring books or something really simple, like whatever sounds interesting to you, just try it out and then, you know, kind of go from there and explore different avenues and what could be fun or what you might be passionate about. Because in the end, it's about like art isn't about, unless you're a professional, it's not about making money. It's not about anyone else, but it's about making yourself happy and like, you know, feeling fulfilled for yourself. So yeah, just, you know, finding it, what you like, what you're passionate about, and just, you know, follow your heart, follow like what you really want to do. And that's all that creativity is about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liezl. And Stephen, parting words of wisdoms for people out there who want to find their creative soul.
Okay, so I alluded to this with the last question, but I've been working on a site called Mental Power Hacks, and Francis is and I have talked about this many times. So it's something where I've talk about how it's okay to give yourself permission to play, and it's okay to give yourself permission to be creative. And I think Liezl talked a little bit about this, about how there's some guilt and shame that can come with not being productive or just going off and playing. And so one of the things I've learned in my life, and I think could apply to a lot of others, is if you're one of those anxious achievers, overachievers, people who feel like they must work 24/7, 8 days a week, that sort of thing, carving out time for rest, self-care, meditation, exercise, creativity can really, really help you not just be more productive in other areas of your life, but also spark new ideas and creativity. So I actually find that resting and playing and trying out new things, like what Liezl said, and what Alicia has done in her life certainly has been very helpful for me personally, and to be happier and to be more mentally well. So I'm hopeful that we can spread the message with this panel that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys. We are now out of time, but it's been such a wonderful joy sitting here with Captain Pike, Princess General Leia, and Dark Magician. And I hope all of you guys got something out of this panel who are viewing this. And we will see you hopefully soon in Comic-Con, hopefully no later than 2022. Fingers crossed. See you guys there. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
May the force be with you.